Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We are here as a family to celebrate this guy right here, our win at the Mississippi River event for the Major League Fishing Invitational. So we're gonna do a quick toast, sparkling grapefruit juice. Cheers.
Cheers! Woo!
And we really just want to share a little bit of the background story. So I was lucky enough to have Sara and the boys there, as well as a bunch of other family and friends. LaCrosse is only a couple hours away. I had a whole pile of people come out, and there's a lot of questions and comments regarding what happened during the end of day three. We had a lock system that has a bunch of barge transportation, and we almost got locked out, meaning I wasn't going to be able to weigh in the winning fish. And we've had a lot of good discussions because Sara experienced the back end, meaning you were watching the live coverage. She knew a lot of stuff that was going on that myself and the other anglers up in Pool 7 had no clue was occurring. So we figured we'd share with you kind of both sides of the story because I've gotten a ton of questions and comments from people asking me about what it was like to go through that locking experience. So I thought it would be fun to share with you kind of the events that led up to that day and then get the background fill from Sara.
And Hank.
And Hank, because Hank was pretty stressed out, I think, right? Yeah, so a little background on this if you haven't paid attention. I'm sure a bunch of you have no idea what I'm talking about. But we went, this is the last event of the year. My goal for the whole year was to come in the top 8 in points. So there's 150 anglers. The top 8 make it to the Bass Pro Tour, which is the highest level of the Major League Fishing tournament pyramid. And that was the goal. We went there with the idea that I knew I needed to have a top 78 finish, guarantees me a spot in. And I had a really tough practice. Like my practice was one of the worst practices I've had, not necessarily for all tournaments, but on the Mississippi River, which is a place I'm familiar with. And I had high expectations, but I never found what I thought I needed to find. Come tournament time, I had the choice to go to Pool 9, chase mostly smallmouth, or go up to Pool 7 where I felt like I had a weed flat that had, I knew if I fished around, I would be able to generate a handful of bites. The quality I saw in practice and the 2 fish that I caught was pretty good, but it wasn't like what I figured would be potentially winning fish. Part of the decision to go to Pool 7 was the fact that I also had some wing dam type smallmouth fishing that I could do in Pool 7 along with the largemouth. Pool 9, I had one thing and pretty much one thing only, and that scared me. So not only do I feel like I had some additional techniques and patterns to fish on Pool 7, it's closer as well. It's only a few mile ride to the lock. Generally, if you get there and you lock up, you're fishing within a half hour. Well, in this case, I never dreamt of having such issue with the locks. So every day of the tournament, so day 1, we locked up, but there was a barge in the lock. So we actually had to wait about it was a little over 2 hours to lock up. So I didn't really start fishing until close to 9 o'clock. Every day on the way back in, we had a barge that was coming back through. So we actually were locking back to Pool 8 around noon. So I had 3 hours to do my fishing up on Pool 7. That was not in the plan when I made the decision to go up there during practice, meaning I've had very few events where you have that much issue with barges. Maybe you have one that throws you off a little bit, but not at the exact time of takeoff and when you need to be coming back. So day 1, we went up there. In the 3 hours I was up there, I was able to secure a 16 and a half pound limit, which is a very good bag for the Mississippi River, especially this time of year. And that's when I kind of started getting to thinking that I might have a special place here. So I was in 3 hours of fishing. Day 2, we launch again. There's a barge in the lock. We had to wait till about 2 hours to get through again. Wasn't really fishing, I think, till maybe it was like 8:30. It was a little earlier. We had a bad thunderstorm come through. I couldn't fish where I wanted to fish for largemouth. I ran some smallmouth stuff, grabbed 3 fish, one of which was a 3.5 pounder. And then around 9-ish, 9:30, I was able to get back on the largemouth spot, pretty much culled everything out. I had 16.5 pounds again by about noon. Had to lock through because there was a barge coming. Well, day 3, I went out in second place, and we thought we were going to be able to get through the locks well. And when I say we thought, all of this is based off of an app that monitors barge traffic on the Mississippi River. And when we got to the ramp, there was a barge coming, but it wasn't quite there yet. Well, it so happened we had a fog delay, and that fog delay prevented us from getting to the lock. And this double-decker barge, the Sheila K. Barger was the barge name. She is a double-decker barge, meaning they can only fit half of it in the lock. Each cycle takes about an hour, so it took them an hour to get the first section, an hour to get the second section. Sure enough, day 3, we weren't able to start fishing our stuff until about 9 o'clock again. At that point, in the locks, all of us were talking, all of us meaning the other anglers, were talking, it looks like we should be fine in terms of barge traffic. We knew there was one coming down from Winona, which is a couple pools up, that would be coming probably just about after when we had to lock through, but we're still monitoring the traffic. Get out there, start fishing. I have a 15.5 pound limit again by like 12:30ish, but we're thinking we can fish until 1:30ish. You get to the lock, give yourself an hour, you'll be down, you'll be back with a half hour to spare, everything would be fine. Well, in this case, I'm checking my app, and on the app, I'm not seeing anything. The only thing I'm seeing that's close is the Sheila K. Barger, which is stopped on the bottom side of the Pool 7 lock, meaning it came through, but we never saw it move. So all of us are thinking that that barge is staging, meaning they've tied up, they're gonna stay there. A lot of times the crew has to have so much sleep, it's not moving at all. But on the app, it stayed just on the bottom side of the pool the whole time. It wasn't a concern of ours because it was going southbound, already had locked through. So if it starts moving, the thought was it would continue to go south. So we're all thinking we can push it a little bit longer. Well, at about 12:30, I see Steve Lopez, who is leading the tournament, run by. I see Brian Partak, who is up there having a good tournament, run by. I see Jared Lintner, who is having a good tournament, run by. And so they were fishing north of me. I was like halfway from the lock to, I think, roughly where they were fishing. I don't know exactly where they were at, but I know they had to run by me to get out. And when I see them all run through, I'm like, I wonder if there's something going on with the barges. I check my app again. I don't see anything but Sheila. Sheila's still sitting down there. But at that point, I'm like, I need to check this out because I didn't think I had winning fish, but I felt confident that I had second place fish, which is a $50,000 check because I had about a 2-pound lead over third place. So if I've got 15.5, they got to catch 17.5, which there were only 1 or 2 bags caught the entire time. But I thought I had still a good half hour to fish, but I decided to run down and check it out. And as we're running down, all of a sudden you get a view of the lock, and I can see that they're tying up a section of a barge. And at that point, I kind of started to freak out a little bit, but it was still about an hour and 20 minutes before check-in time at that point. It was probably about 12:45. We were doing at 2:30. So I ran down there, I checked it out, and I saw it was a double-decker that was coming through, and that kind of got me concerned. They did have the first section tied up, but they had to drop the tug down to Pool 8, tie up the second section, lock up, retie, push it out. Well, I know that cycle is easily an hour to an hour and a half, and that's about the time we had. So at that point, I actually ran from the lock and fished a little bit more. I don't know if you know that, but all of us did. We knew it didn't do us any good to sit at the lock, so we all ran there kind of separately, turned around, and then just started fishing random places though, because we wanted to be able to see the barge. So we're all fishing areas that are within sight of the barge, which isn't where I wanted to fish. It's not where anyone wanted to fish, but we knew if we got an opportunity, we were going to have to go down, because at this point, I'm seeing the barge that's from the north It's now in pool 7, and pool 7's like 10 miles long, and it was moving at 9 knots, so a little over, it's like 12, 13 mile an hour. So I knew it would be there in less than an hour, which meant if we got an opportunity to lock, you had to be in it, because if we weren't, that other barge would be there and they get the rights over the anglers. So none of us wanted to go far. And at that point, we're fishing. Now, while I was fishing, though, you were watching live.
Yeah.
So you knew we were potentially going to be screwed, right?
Yes. It was awful. So I stayed at my brother's house because it was 100 degrees that day. We were hoping to go to a park or something, but we were like, let's just camp out in my brother's house and watch live, because Hank watched every single minute of live that I let you watch, didn't you, buddy? Yeah, you want to know a stat about this tournament, you ask Hank. He knows it. So we stayed at the house, and I wasn't really worried at all. You didn't have a whole lot of fish early in the morning, but they showed you on live, and you were really calm. You're like, I'm just hitting a good stretch up here. We're in a good shape. We've got 2 fish in the live well. We've got a few hours. And you were like just talking us through it. It was super calm, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to get worried. This is right where he wants to be. If he's not worried, I'm not going to be worried. So we were just having a fine morning, and then you caught a fish, and you culled, and we didn't know what you had in your live well, and you went from like, you were lower, let's say 8th or something, all the way up to 1st. And that's when the stress happened, because at the same time they were talking, the same time you weighed those fish on the Bubba scale and we knew what you had, that was about when they started talking about JT Kenny, and the guys on live were talking about how there's this barge coming, this could get real tricky, like, hopefully they know this, we saw you checking your phone. I was like, all right, he's looking at the app, he's got to know it's there, so yeah, so stress level went from nothing to all in. It was so stressful.
So what happened with that? What we've since figured out, Sheila K. Barger locked down in the morning. She went somewhere within pool 8 and unloaded one of the containers.
Okay.
Turned around and then came back. So
what? Not cool, Sheila K. Barger.
So when we started checking the app, I'm seeing Sheila K. Barger because there's names on it. I never saw her go south. So she had come back already and was staging. So by the time I started checking my phone, which was around noon, to see if there was traffic, she was back to the pool 8 lock, or the pool 7 lock. And because of that, all of the anglers, including myself, thought that barge was still going to head south. But it actually had unloaded whatever it needed to unload and came up. And we know that's the case too, because when it came through, all the barge containers were sitting at water level, meaning it was a fully loaded barge. Coming back up, 1 or 2 of them were completely empty because they were sitting way high in the water. So they're empty. So one of the things that, and I've watched the live footage at this point, one of the things that really was interesting to me was all of the aerial footage. So you guys at home got to watch what was going on in the locking system. So you could see the barge tug having its motors on. You could really see what was going on. Whereas the anglers had no clue. We were like, is something broken? Why is nothing happening? And
well, I didn't watch any of that. I was pacing.
Okay.
And ready to throw up.
All right.
Because it was awful.
So at about 1 o'clock, so I ran over there at like 12:30ish, saw that there were a barge there. We all ran and started fishing again. But at like 1:15, I think we all kind of got the feeling now that we better be there to get the opportunity. And everyone basically was there by about 1:15. So it was a bunch of the guys in the top 10. Jared Lintner, Nick Trim, myself, Steve Lopez, Tom Mansour. We all finished, I think, in the top 6.— So it really would have changed stuff around quite a bit. But at that point, so we're kind of talking a little bit, and I talked to Steve Lopez, who was leading in the morning, and I had a little conversation with him during the fog delay where I specifically asked him, I said, listen, it'll be to our benefit if we either don't talk weights in the afternoon, because we were locking back together, so we knew what we had, or to give the exact weights. And the reasoning I asked him to do that was because at the St. Lawrence River, I felt horrible after that event because I was led to believe I was going to win that tournament due to, some sandbagging of weights that occurred. And that was really devastating as an angler. So I talked to Steve and I said, listen, Steve, if either we should each know the weights or we shouldn't know the weights, but I don't want to be sandbagged and I don't want him to feel sandbagged because it would really devastate either of us as an angler. And he was totally cool with that. So at the lock in the afternoon, he came up, he said, well, what do you got? And I told him I got 15.3 is what my Bubba scale said. He told me that he had 13.5, but his weights were a little light each day, so he had roughly 14. And that's what we thought we both had. So at that point, that's when I was like, I actually have a shot at this. The problem with that is I also was sitting there going, I don't know that I'm going to make it back to the lock. So when it comes to my thought process at that point, I mean, it really turned to how am I, A, going to explain this to my family, and B, how am I going to handle it? Because this would devastate me. And that's really what my thought process was. Like, it was a lot of, prep, like, how am I prepping myself to handle the fact that I'm going to idle back to the dock 20 minutes after everyone else has already started to weigh in? I mean, it would have been extremely difficult to handle.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
You're talking a lot here.
Well, tell me your side of it.
I can't get in a word in edgewise. So Hank was at the house, and Hank, were you nervous for Daddy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it pretty stressful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just saying, get through the lock.
Yeah. You said, what did you ask me? Did you ask me to call him, right?
Yeah.
And tell him.
But you
say-
couldn't.
I couldn't, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So we're at my brother's house, and in some respects, I thought maybe Live had it wrong because you were watching your app, and I was like, maybe they have it wrong. I talked to Miles Berghoff, and he's like, it's not perfect. Like, it's not exactly live at all times, as much as you think it is. I was like, okay, so maybe they know something that we don't on the water. Maybe you had a conversation with the lockmaster. I have no idea, right? So I'm also pacing, and my phone is dying because I've got so many texts from so many people. And so my phone is plugged in. I don't want to go too far from my phone because the day before you called to say that you had made it into the lock. When you called, I was driving to LaCrosse, and I was like, what's Matt calling for? Why? He never calls on a tournament day. What's going on? So I answer, I'm like, what's wrong? And you're like, I just want to let you know I'm in the lock. I'm like, thank you for calling me, because that's always my biggest stress whenever we're dealing with different conditions where it's not just you at play, when there's other people, when there's locks, when there's tidal water, when you're cutting across Lake Champlain or whatever it is, I might get worried, right, about safety and getting back. And so I didn't want to go too far from my phone because I was like, I feel like he's going to call me. Like, once he gets into that lock, he's going to call me. And I want to be here. I want to be able to answer it. So I didn't want to, I was pacing, but not, I was like a cage. We were like caged animals. Oh, it was so stressful. And my mom and dad were at the house with me. And so finally we decided to get in the car to get to the weigh-in. But while you were processing outside the lock, we were processing on our side. I was like, there is no way. As I have experience with locks, I mean, I lived in the Mississippi River when I was in chiropractic school. So you watch them, I get familiar with them, and they're not fast. So I was really like coming to terms with, especially between 2 and 2:30 as we left the house to go to the park where the weigh-in was. I didn't even get there early. Like, I got there, I think I pulled into the parking lot at 2:30 because I was like, we're done. We're done. This isn't happening. And my mom was in the car with me, and we were just talking it through.
When did you find out I got through the lock?
Well, when we drove to the, I did everything. So you have your superstitions, I have mine. So I
You
did
do?
kind of.
What do you do?
Well, it wasn't so much superstitions as the second day I was there. We went and got to an Arnold Palmer at the Quick Trip right down the street, and I was like, I'm doing the same thing. So I literally parked in the same spot. I turned the lid the same way. The same girl was checking out, so I went to her. I parked in the same spot in the parking
See,
lot.
you have the same issue I have.
And so by the time we got down to the water's edge, I think it was probably like 2:35, and your mom was there, your dad was there, some friends were there, some people that knew you, and I think we saw you like bobbing in the water out there,
I did.
just as someone was like, yeah, they made it back on time. So that was probably 2:35-ish. I mean, I'm pretty sure I jumped up and screamed and hooped and hollered, and I 100% know that I high-fived anyone that was within a 5-foot vicinity of me. I didn't even know half the people. I'm like, I don't know you, give me a high five. And then you came to the docks and I ran down to you.
Yeah, one of my fondest memories of the event will be you running on the dock yelling at me.
I was yelling at you?
Yeah, I don't know if I think you said something like, "Do you know what you've done?"
No.
Or do you know what you've put us through?
No.
And
I said, do you
'cause I
know where you are?
Oh,
Like place. And I didn't, that wasn't like me running down the dock. I ran down the dock, and then as I was next to you, I was like, do you know where you are? And that's when the tournament director came over and told me, don't spoil it, let him figure it out on his own.
yeah, but you also said something like, "Do you know what you've put us through?" Because I turned and I like looked at you. I said, "Put you through."
Yeah, I do remember that.
That was, it was one of the most stressful.
I have never been more stressed than that. That was miserable. I feel like I almost threw up like 3 times.
Well, I gotta give, like, I do have to give a huge shout out to the Barge guys, because I don't know the exact process. I know Tom Mansour called the Lockmaster and gave, basically laid it out there, saying there's guys who could win this tournament, and I don't know exactly the details. He came over to me at about 2:00. And he looked at me, he goes, "Matt, we're going to be okay. I made some calls, we're going to be okay." And he just laughed in a Tom Mansour laugh, which just makes you feel comfortable. And 2 minutes later, Barge starts moving. And at that point, in a normal cycle, we would have to be in at about 2:05. The normal cycle, if everything goes good, is maybe 15 minutes. And the Barge operator, he did not do anything that was unsafe or he shouldn't have done. I don't know what his guidelines are, but I think he recognized the fact that we're professionals, we know what we're doing, and he dropped the water as fast as he could. He got the doors shut as fast as he could. There was no dilly-dallying on his part.
Yeah, and I think all of this was covered, like with the drone shots or whatever.
Yeah.
But we were driving.
So you didn't see
my
that.
brother, no, and literally, like, as we were leaving my brother's driveway, my brother was working, but he was watching on his phone, and he's got a ton of experience on the river, right? Because he lives there. And he texts me, and he said, "They're not going to make it. I think that barge is stuck." And I, like, lost it. I was like, oh my God, we're not going to win.
Yeah, it was it was an emotional roller coaster. Like, it was such a calm tournament for me, where I feel like everything was good. Like, just solid. I just felt so comfortable. Like, I was such a wreck in practice, and in the tournament,
He was a total wreck.
like the night before the tournament, all of a sudden I got like this calm over me, and I'm like, I'm just going fishing. I've got an area that I've made the decision to go to. I'm just gonna do it. And like, there were a lot of signs, like the whole time. Like, you called when I told you I felt calm. You're like, "You're never gonna believe this, Matt, but there's an otter in the yard."
Back there.
I don't know if I've ever seen an otter, but
No.
if you don't know me, an otter is like my spirit animal. I love otters, and you told me that, and like, there were a lot of things. So like, one thing I haven't told you is, when I came out of the lock, the last day, there was like this surreal moment of like me going through the doors where I just had this thought where I'm like, I'm gonna make it. But I looked up and there was, as much as I don't like seagulls, there was a flock of seagulls that was just coming around the wall of the lock. So like there's a bullhead that we had to go out and around. And this flock of seagulls was coming through, and I just remember thinking, I need to remember this moment because it could be a huge moment, but it was like the most serene, peaceful look of like the seagulls just gliding right in front of me. And I just remember thinking like, I'm gonna get in. Like everything's gonna be good. And the day before, like after day 2, I just weighed in. I'm sitting in second place, and there's a young lady that comes up to me, and she's like, I just found this 4-leaf clover. And she hands me, I've got it sitting here. She hands me a 4-leaf clover, and she's like, this is for good luck. So I put it in my wallet. Like,
Yeah, she's a huge follower, subscriber.
yeah, it was such a cool time. But I never once felt stressed or really emotional. Like I had a great time. Until I was at that lock and Steve told me what he weighed. And at that point, I went from being like, oh, I fished a great tournament to, oh my God, I could win, but I'm going to win and not be able to weigh in my fish. How am I going to explain this to family and friends? Like this up and down roller coaster to the point, I mean, like once I checked in, we had about a 10-minute idle to the docks. I mean, I lost it. Like I could, you know, the camera guy's like, tell me how you're feeling. Like you might have your first win. What would it mean? And I just looked at him. I'm like, I mean, I just was bawling. And that's one thing. Like, I think when I watch the video of me on stage, it almost looks like I'm a little bit emotionless, even though I was on the verge of losing it.
Yeah.
But it was almost like I was so mentally exhausted,
I think
and
that's
I had
exactly
already
what it was.
had like my moment in the boat where I was bawling, like I could not handle it. So it was almost like I was over that once I was on stage. So it was such
I think
a
it was the
crazy
relief.
moment.
I think when you finally won, it was like I think that's the first time all day I took a deep breath. Like, no, not all day. From like noon on. It was just like, okay. But I think it was also, I got the same vibe you did, and I've told you this. Like, I thought the whole week, I was like, the whole week felt different. Like, everything. Random things just like fell into place. Not just the 4-leaf clover, but like, I drove to LaCrosse on Tuesday, and I stopped at we stopped at the little Amish store, right, Hank?
Yep.
Yep. Who'd we run into there?
Grandma, Grandpa.
Yeah, like literally, we did not plan it. We just ran into them. I was like, oh, fancy seeing you here, you know? It is the otter thing on the yard. There were 2 other otter things, one thing each day. Like my sister-in-law just comes out of her son's room with this giant stuffed otter, you know, for the boys to play with. And I was like, where did that come from? Like what's going on here? Like it was just signs everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really tough to watch the live episode because from when I watched it, I could see your point of view as well as knowing what I knew on my side. So it was difficult to watch that process. And you know, I do since I've got this opportunity, I do want to say one thing. Like I've had a couple of comments where people thought I was cursing at Steve Lopez in the locks because I dropped an F-bomb. And I want to be very clear with that there was no cursing at Steve Lopez. What I was telling Steve was he should get in front of me in the locks. He was the leader of the event. I was saying, Steve, get the F in front of me. And I was saying it because he should be the first one out of that lock. And Steve, being the gentleman that he was, knew that I probably had the win, was telling me to get up in front of the lock. So we were going back and forth, trying to get each other to take the lead. So, you know, there is absolutely no part of that was me cursing at Steve. I think Steve is a tremendous individual. We've got a ton of respect for each other, to the point where we wanted each other to have the better chance of getting in. So that, just to clarify that. And part of that is I mean, we are competitors out there, so it's like we're trying to direct how everything goes. And
But on live, I thought that was really clear. The competitive nature, but also the companionship, and like we've got each other's back. Like
Yeah.
I thought that was really clear. I was like, wow, this is really cool. That was actually some of my favorite live coverage. Was you
Yeah,
guys
that's-
talking like back and forth, like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. Like here's like it was.
and that is 100% how it is. I mean, Steve and I know each other through tournaments, but I mean, we got together after day one and exchanged phone numbers to make sure both of us would get in. Meaning, hey, we both are.
Yeah.
We know we're up in pool 7. If you have issues, you call me. I'll get you in. Like that's what we, as competitors, you would think we wouldn't do that, but. Anglers are a different breed, and as much as we want to beat everyone, we don't want people to go through hardship. And in an event where you're doing good, we're going to do whatever we can to get each other back.
Like who was it that gave you your water?
My water?
Your water. He's like I got other things. Like I'm gonna give you
Oh,
this.
yeah, Jared Lintner after day 2 came up to me and he goes, he's like, Matt, I had no idea you were catching him in that stretch. I'll give it to you. I'm not going there. And that's amazing of Jared Lintner to do, but he established himself in that same area on the first day as well. And I told Jared, I'm like, you feel free to fish it. Like I didn't have a spot. I had a quarter-mile stretch. And he was fishing with a topwater bait through it. He made one pass the first 2 days. Day 3, he got close to me. Not close. He was coming from a different direction, got close to the stretch I was fishing, packed up, went to a different spot. Like it was amazing. And that's what happens a lot of times on the water. A lot of times it doesn't happen, but in this event, everyone going to pool 7 was really rooting for everyone in pool 7. It was a pretty amazing thing. But we're probably already at a half hour now, so I just wanted to do the video for you because Sara and I we've had so many interesting discussions, like sharing each side and seeing how, as an angler, you think you're out there by yourself, but I had so many people at home that were concerned for us in terms of getting through the lock, and I'm just glad we did.
Yeah, it was amazing.
So
I mean, it all worked out.
thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for letting us
Cheers.
babble on a little bit, and we'll get back to normal tip videos here soon.
Hey, we had to enjoy this. This was 13 years in the making. I feel like we deserve a little plug.
Here.
If nothing else, this is for our own history.
We'll go back and watch this when we're old and gray.
Yeah. This will be a memory. As my sister-in-law said, this is a memory we will replay for the rest of our lives. The whole tournament was just incredible. So thanks for letting us be a little selfish and talk through it a little bit.